A school is supposed to be one of the most boringly structured places on earth. Rules, grades, deadlines, attendance, discipline. A giant institution designed to teach children that actions have outcomes. And somehow, that is exactly what makes it so unbearable for entitled parents. Because the moment a child feels embarrassed, gets punished, fails, loses, or hears the word no, some parents stop acting like adults and start acting like customer complaint departments with legal stationery. Tonight, we're opening the file on 101 parents who sued schools for the dumbest reasons. The grade lawsuits, the rule meltdowns, the discipline tantrums, and the parental ego trips that turned education into legal theater. Fact 1. The failing math grade lawsuit. In Ohio, one parent sued a school because their son failed math, as if algebra had personally targeted the family. The kid missed assignments, bombed quizzes, and treated homework like a human rights violation, but somehow the school was supposed to absorb all that and still deliver an A. The lawsuit framed failure as injustice instead of arithmetic doing its job. They didn't sue the grade. They sued the idea that effort matters. Fact 2. The valedictorian delusion. In Florida, a parent sued after their daughter was not named valedictorian because apparently second place in high school now qualifies as legal persecution. The student had strong grades, just not the strongest, but the family acted like the school had stolen a crown from a rightful monarch. They weren't fighting for fairness. They were trying to subpoena reality for ranking their child correctly. Fact 3. The honor roll meltdown. In Texas, one mother sued because her child missed honor roll by a fraction of a point, which to her meant the system was broken, cruel, and possibly anti-family. Never mind deadlines, grading policies, or the radical concept that lines have edges. Her child didn't get robbed. He just got introduced to a world where almost and actually are not the same thing. Fact 4. The standardized test tragedy. In Georgia, a father sued after his son failed a standardized test needed for advancement, insisting the exam caused emotional distress and did not reflect his child's true intelligence. That may be true. It also may be true that intelligence gets tested by tests. He wanted the school to apologize because his son and the answer sheet had philosophical differences. Fact 5. The harsh grading conspiracy. In Arizona, one parent sued a teacher for grading too harshly, which is a beautiful way of saying the teacher kept reading the work before scoring it. The child's essays were sloppy, incomplete, and about one revision away from being a cry for help. But the parent treated red ink like a civil rights issue. Apparently, accountability is now oppression when it happens in blue folders. Fact 6. The class rank lawsuit. In California, a family sued after their daughter dropped in class rank, not because the ranking formula changed, but because other students had the nerve to outperform her. They treated competition like discrimination and a lower number like reputational damage. The school didn't sabotage her standing. Other kids just kept existing academically, which this family found legally offensive. Fact 7. The C instead of a B crisis. In Louisiana, one parent sued because their child got a C instead of a B, as if one letter had committed a felony on the transcript. The teacher had documented missing work, weak test performance, and every opportunity to recover. None of that mattered once parental ego entered the courtroom in business casual. They acted like the school had ruined a future. It had merely issued an accurate vowel. Fact 8. The retention rage. In Michigan, a parent sued after the school held their child back a grade due to consistent academic failure, because, apparently, promoting unreadiness is now considered compassion. The child was behind in multiple subjects, but the family insisted retention would hurt confidence more than ignorance. They wanted the school to solve poor performance by moving it to the next classroom. Fact 9. The too stressful exam lawsuit. In Nevada, one mother sued because a major exam made her child anxious, which is one of the boldest misunderstandings of education ever filed in public. Yes, tests create stress. So do adulthood, rent, and every email marked urgent. She wasn't fighting for student wellness. She was trying to outlaw pressure before life had the chance to do it first. Fact 10. The National Honor Society fantasy. In North Carolina, a parent sued after their child didn't make National Honor Society, despite having grades and discipline records that screamed absolutely not. The family treated selective recognition like mandatory inclusion and acted shocked that standards were, in fact, selective. They wanted prestige without qualification, basically LinkedIn for minors with a better dress code. Fact 11. The extra credit afterlife. In Florida, one parent sued because a teacher would not accept extra credit after the semester had already ended, grades had closed, and the academic corpse was legally cold. The student had ignored assignments all term, then suddenly discovered ambition right after consequences arrived. They didn't want mercy. They wanted time travel with a grading rubric and a school willing to fake the timestamp. Fact 12. The GPA weighting emergency. In Texas, a family sued because the school's GPA weighting system did not flatter their child enough, which is an incredible way to admit your kid was fine, just not exceptional. The formula was published, applied to everyone, and understood by every parent except the one currently acting like decimals were a hate crime. They weren't fighting bad math. They were fighting the emotional pain of accurate ranking. Fact 13. The advanced class rejection lawsuit. In Georgia, a parent sued after their son was denied placement in advanced classes because, apparently, rigor is now something you can litigate into existence. The student lacked the scores, lacked the teacher recommendations, and mostly lacked the evidence. None of that stopped the family from treating "not ready" like institutional abuse. They wanted honors placement for a child whose transcript was begging for supervision, not acceleration. Fact 14. The late assignment civil rights case. In Arizona, one mother sued because a teacher counted her child's project late after it was, quite aggressively, late. The assignment had a deadline, the deadline passed, and the project arrived afterward like a confused tourist. The parent framed this as inflexibility bordering on cruelty. She was essentially asking the school to rule that clocks are discriminatory when they inconvenience her son. Fact 15. The plagiarism denial opera. In California, a parent sued after their daughter lost points for plagiarism, insisting the teacher had misinterpreted collaboration in the same way arsonists misinterpret warmth. Large chunks of the paper matched online sources exactly, but the family still treated copy and paste like a misunderstood creative style. They didn't sue because the accusation was false. They sued because the evidence was rude enough to be obvious. Fact 16. The overslept exam tragedy. In Louisiana, one father sued after his son missed a major exam because he overslept, which is a bold attempt to make the school liable for a teenager losing a fight against an alarm clock. The family argued the test should be reopened because the student deserved another chance. He did get another chance. It was called setting 3 alarms and respecting the first one. Fact 17. The recommendation letter fallout. In Michigan, a parent sued because a teacher would not write a glowing college recommendation for a student whose behavior had been somewhere between inconsistent and exhausting. Apparently, honesty had now become defamation if it threatened the admissions fantasy. They wanted a teacher to write fiction on official letterhead and call it student support. Fact 18. The group project grievance. In Nevada, one mother sued after her son received the same mediocre group project grade as the rest of his team, insisting he had been dragged down by weaker students. This was awkward because the teacher had records showing he contributed roughly the energy of a decorative houseplant. They sued the project because "my child is the real victim here" remains a full-time religion in some households. Fact 19. The National Test Anxiety sequel. In Ohio, a parent sued because a standardized exam allegedly damaged their child's confidence, as if schools had suddenly become legally responsible for every moment a student discovers limitation. The child scored badly, the report came back honestly, and the family responded like the answer sheet had committed emotional assault. They didn't want feedback. They wanted academic weather forecasts with only sunshine and lies. Fact 20. The My Child is Gifted, Actually lawsuit. In North Carolina, a parent sued after their child failed to qualify for a gifted program, insisting the testing process had somehow missed the brilliance only visible at home. The school had the scores, the criteria, and the data. The family had vibes, conviction, and the dangerous belief that self-esteem should count as evidence. They wanted the program to identify talent the way psychics identify ghosts, enthusiastically and without proof. Fact 21. The fighting suspension lawsuit. In Florida, one parent sued after her son got suspended for fighting, framing the whole thing like the school had criminalized his big emotions. Witnesses, staff reports, and probably half the hallway all agreed he threw the first punch. None of that slowed the family down. They weren't mad their son hit someone. They were mad the school refused to treat assault like a leadership exercise. Fact 22. The confiscated phone tragedy. In Texas, a mother sued because a teacher took her daughter's phone after repeated warnings, as if temporary separation from TikTok now qualified as unlawful imprisonment. The student had been texting through class like education was an ad break. This wasn't a civil liberties issue. It was a family discovering, in real time, that the classroom was not legally required to worship screen addiction. Fact 23. The tardiness detention meltdown. In Georgia, a father sued after his son got detention for chronic lateness, because apparently showing up whenever you feel spiritually ready is now a protected identity. The student had a long record of strolling in after class started, yet the family acted like punctuality had launched a personal attack. They didn't want fairness. They wanted the school to rebrand irresponsibility as flexible scheduling. Fact 24. The cheating consequence lawsuit. In Arizona, one parent sued after her daughter was punished for cheating on a test, insisting the school had overreacted to what she called academic pressure behavior. That is one hell of a euphemism for copying answers and getting caught, with all the subtlety of a bank robber on a Ring camera. They weren't defending integrity. They were trying to negotiate a better public relations strategy for fraud. Fact 25. The benched athlete emergency. In California, a family sued because their son got benched from the team after violating rules, as if high school sports had become a constitutional right, instead of an activity with conditions attached. The coach had standards, the parents had outrage, and a child who thought team rules were for the less gifted. They wanted starting minutes for behavior that barely deserved a folding chair. Fact 26. The prom ban lawsuit. In Louisiana, one mother sued after her daughter was barred from prom over disciplinary issues, treating the school dance like a sacred democratic institution instead of a privilege attached to not causing trouble all semester. The family spoke about irreparable emotional harm, like sequins were life support. They didn't lose a prom ticket. They lost a fantasy and sent a lawyer to mourn it. Fact 27. The locker search outrage. In Michigan, a parent sued after a locker search turned up prohibited items, arguing the school had violated trust, privacy, and apparently the family's preferred arrangement with reality. The school had policy, cause, and the actual items in hand. The parent still behaved like the true offense was getting caught. They weren't upset about what was in the locker. They were upset the locker betrayed the family narrative. Fact 28. The truancy notice lawsuit. In Nevada, one father sued because the school reported his daughter for truancy after a long streak of absences, as though attendance records were a hateful rumor started by administrators. The school had dates, notices, and the radical belief that children should physically appear for education to occur. He wanted the school to stop documenting reality because reality was becoming inconveniently organized. Fact 29. The field trip ban tantrum. In Ohio, a parent sued after her son was banned from a field trip because of prior behavior problems, insisting the school had robbed him of educational opportunity. What the school had actually robbed him of was a bus seat and a chance to ruin a museum for everyone else. They acted like he'd been denied knowledge itself, when really he'd been denied a supervised public meltdown in another zip code. Fact 30. The parking privilege lawsuit. In North Carolina, a mother sued because her daughter lost campus parking privileges after repeated rule violations, which is an incredible amount of legal energy to spend on a teenager being told to stop acting like a menace in a Honda. The policy was clear, the warnings were real, and the consequences were basic. They treated losing a parking spot like the school had seized family land in wartime. Fact 31. The no-tolerance lawsuit. In Florida, a parent sued after her son got punished under the school's no-tolerance policy, acting like rules were fine in theory until they landed on her household like weather. The student had done exactly the thing the policy was written for, but the family still spoke as if consequence itself were the scandal. They weren't fighting injustice. They were fighting the rude discovery that policies are not decorative. Fact 32. The threat was just a joke. Case in Texas, a father sued after his son was suspended for threatening another student, insisting the whole thing had been misunderstood humor. Apparently, the school was supposed to treat intimidation like improv night and wait for a punchline that never existed. They wanted the administration to believe that menacing language becomes harmless if you say, "relax," afterward with enough parental confidence. Fact 33. The forced apology emergency. In Georgia, a mother sued because her daughter was required to apologize after bullying another student, framing the apology as emotional humiliation rather than the bare minimum price of not behaving like a tiny sociopath. The school wanted accountability. The family wanted victim status with better lighting. They acted like saying, "I'm sorry," was crueler than the behavior that made it necessary. Fact 34. The skipping class freedom lawsuit. In Arizona, one parent sued after her son faced discipline for repeatedly skipping class, as if attendance had become an oppressive suggestion rather than the central operating premise of school. The family argued he learned better independently, which was impressive given how independently he kept not learning. They didn't want educational freedom. They wanted truancy with branding. Fact 35. The social media consequence meltdown. In California, a parent sued after the school disciplined her daughter over threatening social media posts, because apparently the internet is now a magical place where school rules and basic decency go to die. The screenshots existed, the posts were real, and the family still behaved like documentation was somehow the bigger offense. They weren't upset the school saw the posts. They were upset the posts turned out to have consequences off Wi-Fi. Fact 36. The sports eligibility fantasy. In Louisiana, a father sued after his son lost athletic eligibility due to poor grades, treating the entire system like a personal attack on talent. The school had one simple rule: if you want to play, you also have to pass. The family heard that and somehow interpreted it as discrimination against touchdowns. They wanted varsity privileges on a transcript that looked like a hostage negotiation. Fact 37. The graduation stage rage. In Michigan, a parent sued because her daughter was barred from walking at graduation after serious disciplinary issues, as if the ceremony existed to celebrate breathing near a diploma. The school still granted the credential. It just refused to provide the stage moment. They acted like missing one ceremonial stroll was tyranny, when really it was just consequences in a cap and gown. Fact 38. The record eraser lawsuit. In Nevada, one family sued because the school would not remove a disciplinary mark from their child's record, even though the record was accurate, documented, and attached to conduct that had definitely occurred in this universe. They didn't want fairness. They wanted the educational version of witness protection. Same kid, same behavior, brand new paperwork, and absolutely no questions asked. Fact 39. The threat to transfer tantrum. In Ohio, a parent sued after the school refused to reverse punishment despite repeated demands, because some families genuinely believe escalating volume is a substitute for changing facts. When the school didn't fold, the family acted like institutional backbone itself had become abuse. They were not trying to fix the problem. They were trying to bully the school into pretending the problem never happened. Fact 40. The consequence amnesty lawsuit. In North Carolina, a mother sued because the school would not give her son a fresh start after repeated behavior issues, which sounds noble until you realize she meant erase every consequence so college applications won't notice. The school declined to participate in this little laundering operation. They weren't asking for growth. They were asking for a legal deep clean on a child's actual behavior. Fact 41. The lead role lawsuit. In Florida, A parent sued after her daughter didn't get the lead in the school play, apparently because auditions were only fair if they ended with the family's desired casting. Another student performed better, got the part, and the parent responded like Shakespeare himself had committed discrimination. They didn't want theater education. They wanted a court-ordered standing ovation for a child who simply was not the best one in the room. Fact 42. The Student Council Election Meltdown. In Texas, one father sued because his son lost the student council election, as if democracy had personally failed the family brand. The kid ran, the students voted, and the votes were counted correctly, which was exactly the problem. They weren't angry about corruption. They were angry that an actual election refused to treat popularity at home like a constitutional right at school. Fact 43. The Public Correction Trauma Case. In Georgia, a mother sued because a teacher corrected her daughter in front of the class, framing the moment as humiliation instead of what it was: basic classroom instruction with witnesses. The student had answered wrong, the teacher fixed it, and the parent reacted like factual accuracy had become emotional abuse. They wanted a school where mistakes are never visible, which is a beautiful idea if your long-term plan is raising delusional adults. Fact 44. The Solo Park Crisis. In Arizona, a parent sued because her child wasn't given a solo in the school concert, apparently because music programs now exist to validate household mythology rather than reward talent, timing, and actual singing ability. Another student got the part, and the family treated the result like an organized attack on confidence. They didn't want merit. They wanted auto-tune for reality and legal backup for the family delusion. Fact 45. The Cheer Squad Rejection Lawsuit. In California, a family sued after their daughter failed to make the cheer squad, despite tryouts being the one ancient ritual where people literally line up to be judged. She did not score high enough, the team moved on, and the parent responded like pom-poms had been weaponized. They acted as if school spirit required compulsory inclusion, even when the jump said otherwise in broad daylight. Fact 46. The Graduation Speech Entitlement Case. In Louisiana, one mother sued because her son wasn't chosen to give the graduation speech, even though other students had stronger grades, cleaner records, and a much lower chance of turning the microphone into a hostage situation. They weren't defending his voice. They were trying to legally force a school to clap for the family's self-image in front of folding chairs and grandparents. Fact 47. The Yearbook Placement Scandal. In Michigan, a parent sued because her daughter's yearbook photo appeared in a section she considered less flattering, which is a breathtaking amount of legal effort for a book teenagers stop caring about the second adulthood hits rent level. The placement was routine. The outrage was Olympic. They didn't sue over harm. They sued because a rectangle on glossy paper failed to honor the family aesthetic. Facts 48. The Honest Feedback Disaster. In Nevada, a father sued after a teacher told his son he needed to improve his presentation skills, because apparently, constructive criticism now counts as an act of violence if it bruises a household fantasy. The feedback was normal, useful, and something functioning adults receive every Tuesday. They wanted school without evaluation, which is basically education reimagined as praise with lockers. Fact 49. The Participation Ribbon Lawsuit. In Ohio, one parent sued because her child did not receive a participation ribbon at a school event, which is a fantastic way to tell the world you think existence should come with commemorative fabric. The child participated, yes. So did everyone else. The school simply didn't hand out consolation silk for breathing. They weren't protecting self-esteem. They were trying to litigate applause into a mandatory resource. Fact 50. The Seating Chart Betrayal. In North Carolina, a mother sued because the classroom seating chart separated her daughter from her friends, treating desk placement like exile and educational strategy like emotional sabotage. The teacher had ordinary reasons: distraction, talking, and wanting to teach instead of referee a gossip hive. They acted like the school had broken up a peace treaty, when really it had just moved one loud child 3 feet to the left. Fact 51. The Talent Show Cut Lawsuit. In Florida, a parent sued because her child's act was cut from the school talent show, as if every badly rehearsed 3-minute disaster now deserved constitutional protection. The performance ran long, lacked basic preparation, and apparently mistook enthusiasm for competence. They didn't want a talent show. They wanted a hostage situation with stage lights and a principal legally required to call it art. Fact 52. The club position grief case. In Texas, one father sued after his daughter lost a student club position, treating the whole thing like a coup instead of what it was. Teenagers voting, teachers supervising, and one child learning she was not permanently entitled to leadership. They weren't defending democracy. They were suing because democracy produced the wrong winner and refused to apologize to the family ego. Fact 53. The excluded from activity meltdown. In Georgia, a mother sued because her son felt excluded from a school activity he did not qualify for, which is an incredible way to describe standards doing exactly what standards were invented to do. The criteria were posted, the student missed them, and the family still behaved like rules had singled him out personally. They wanted inclusion without qualification. Basically, achievement with the paperwork removed. Fact 54. The dress code humiliation lawsuit. In Arizona, a parent sued after her daughter was asked to change because of dress code, insisting the correction caused shame, trauma, and apparently a civilizational collapse. The school handled it quietly. The family handled it like a courtroom reenactment of the fall of Rome. They didn't object to how the rule was enforced. They objected to the idea that the rule applied to their child at all. Fact 55. The redo presentation outrage. In California, a father sued because his son was required to redo a presentation after delivering something so underprepared it barely qualified as spoken language. The teacher offered a second chance. The family treated it like public degradation. They didn't want grace. They wanted a passing grade for a performance that looked like panic wearing khakis and mispronouncing half the assignment. Fact 56. The classroom prank embarrassment case. In Louisiana, a parent sued because her daughter got embarrassed during a harmless classroom prank tied to a school activity, as if mild awkwardness had suddenly become a compensable injury. The student was not harmed, excluded, or targeted. She was briefly uncomfortable, like every human being who has ever existed in public. They were trying to bill the school for one normal Tuesday in the emotional development of a teenager. Fact 57. The solo rejection sequel. In Michigan, one mother sued after her child lost another performance opportunity, insisting the repeated rejection showed a pattern of emotional damage rather than a pattern of not being the strongest performer. At a certain point, the legal theory was basically, if my child wants the spotlight must comply. They didn't sue because the school was unfair. They sued because auditions kept refusing to cosplay as family therapy. Fact 58. The hurt confidence complaint. In Nevada, a parent sued after a teacher told her daughter she needed to participate more and speak up with better preparation, because apparently ordinary feedback now qualifies as an attack on self-worth. The comments were clear, calm, and exactly what school is for. They wanted an education system where confidence rises magically while nobody says anything useful enough to help it. Fact 59. The not invited enough case. In Ohio, one father sued because his son was not selected for a student activity group, framing the rejection like social exile instead of what it was: limited spots, stronger candidates, and one family discovering that "my child wanted it" is not a legal standard. They weren't fighting exclusion. They were fighting the unbearable idea that selection might involve choosing someone else. Fact 60. The feelings over criteria lawsuit. In North Carolina, a mother sued because her child felt devastated after being denied entry into an activity with clear requirements. And, apparently, devastation now outranks criteria in the family constitution. The school had standards. The parent had tears and a lawyer. They wanted the institution to stop measuring readiness and start grading emotional volume instead. Fact 61. The hat rule war crime. In Florida, a parent sued because her son was told to remove his hat in class, as if basic school etiquette had suddenly evolved into state-sponsored oppression. The rule applied to everyone, had existed forever, and required nothing more tragic than taking fabric off your own head indoors. They didn't want fairness. They wanted an exemption so personal it could only be explained by ego wearing a baseball cap. Fact 62. The cell phone ban tragedy in Texas. One father sued because the school enforced its no-phone policy during class, apparently because his daughter's right to stare at a glowing rectangle had become more sacred than the lesson plan. The rule was clear, universal, and impossible to misunderstand unless your family treated attention span as negotiable. They acted like the school had seized property. It had merely interrupted the child's long-term relationship with distraction. Fact 63. The uniform policy meltdown. In Georgia, a mother sued because her child was expected to follow the same uniform policy as every other student, which is a breathtaking amount of legal passion to invest in khakis and compliance. The school wanted consistency, the family wanted individuality, but only the kind that survives paperwork and loses none of the privilege. They weren't fighting oppression, they were fighting the emotional burden of not being the main character in a polo shirt. Fact 64. The attendance requirement outrage. In Arizona, a parent sued because her son was blocked from taking an exam after piling up too many absences, as if showing up had become a weird elitist preference instead of the base layer of education. The policy was written down, repeated, and fully visible before the family discovered it personally. They wanted the school to treat missing class as a lifestyle choice with academic cashback. Fact 65. The vaccine form apocalypse. In California, one father sued because the school wouldn't let his daughter attend without the required health documentation, acting like paperwork itself had launched a tyrannical campaign against his family. The school asked for forms. He responded like it had demanded a kidney and a public confession. They didn't object to the rule until it expected them to do one administrative task before breakfast. Fact 66. The sports age rule conspiracy. In Louisiana, a mother sued because her son was barred from competing under an age rule everyone else somehow managed to understand without litigation. The cutoff date existed, the date of birth existed, and both refused to bend under parental volume. They acted like time itself had unfairly targeted their child, which is ambitious, even by lawsuit standards. Fact 67. The graduation requirement tantrum. In Michigan, a parent sued because the school wouldn't waive graduation requirements for her daughter, despite the fact that requirements are sort of the entire reason a diploma means anything at all. The family wanted the credential without the tedious middle step of meeting the conditions. They weren't asking for flexibility. They were asking the school to print fiction on heavy paper and call it achievement. Fact 68. The lunch policy meltdown. In Nevada, one father sued because the cafeteria wouldn't hand his son a full meal without the required lunch account balance, which is a wild amount of courtroom energy to spend on the consequences of not paying for food. The policy was dull, clear, and entirely free of mystery. They treated a billing rule like institutional cruelty, which is what happens when inconvenience grows up believing it deserves legal representation. Fact 69. The school starts too early lawsuit. In Ohio, a parent sued because the school day began too early for her child, as though ringing a morning bell had become a form of educational sadism. The start time applied to the entire student body, but apparently only one family discovered sunrise and structure at the same moment. They weren't suing the schedule. They were suing the ancient idea that morning happens whether your child respects it or not. Fact 70. The family vacation exemption case. In North Carolina, a mother sued because the school refused to excuse her child's absences for a family trip, apparently because Disneyland now outranked attendance policy in the hierarchy of civic values. The school's position was boring and reasonable. The family's was that leisure should count as institutional cooperation. They wanted the school calendar to function like a hotel concierge for their travel plans. Fact 71. The backpack inspection outrage. In Florida, a parent sued because school staff inspected her son's backpack under an existing policy, reacting like a zipper had been opened by federal agents instead of educators trying to keep a building functional and safe. The rule was known, the authority was clear, and the family still treated it like a personal invasion staged for drama. They weren't shocked by the inspection. They were shocked the school didn't ask their child's permission to enforce its own rules. Fact 72. The absence limit meltdown. In Texas, one father sued after his daughter lost credit because of excessive absences, despite enough missed days to make attendance look like a casual hobby. The school had warnings, thresholds, and paperwork. The family had righteous outrage and the dazzling legal theory that repeated non-appearance should not affect participation. They wanted academic credit for a student who treated showing up like an optional side quest. Fact 73. The sports physical conspiracy. In Georgia, a mother sued because her son couldn't join athletics until the required physical form was submitted, apparently because one signed document had now become the greatest obstacle in his sporting journey. Every other family managed the form. This one chose litigation over a pediatric appointment. They weren't blocked by bureaucracy. They were blocked by the crushing injustice of being asked to finish one piece of admin before demanding Friday night glory. Fact 74. The school-eyed tyranny case. In Arizona, a parent sued because her daughter was disciplined for repeatedly refusing to wear her school ID, as if a laminated badge had become the iron collar of modern oppression. The school wanted a visible identifier. The family wanted freedom from lanyards, and ideally, all institutional memory. They treated basic campus procedure like authoritarian theater because apparently, accountability now feels fascist when clipped to a neck cord. Fact 75. The Hall Pass Civil Rights Movement. In California, one father sued because his son got in trouble for wandering the halls without a pass, which is a breathtaking amount of legal protest over being asked to prove you're supposed to be out of class. The rule was ancient, boring, and understood by every functioning student with legs. They acted like the school had criminalized walking, when really it had just noticed a child freelancing in the corridor again. Fact 76. The event access outrage. In Louisiana, a mother sued after her daughter lost access to a school event for breaking rules beforehand, because apparently consequences were acceptable only as long as they stayed abstract and happened to someone else's kid. The event was optional. The behavior that caused the ban was not imaginary. They wanted the privilege without the conduct, which is basically parenting by coupon code. Fact 77. The Forbidden Snack Scandal. In Michigan, a parent sued because the classroom banned certain snacks, treating cracker policy like nutritional apartheid. The rule existed for allergy control and consistency, two tragically unglamorous concepts that did not flatter the family's preferred emotional storyline. They weren't defending lunch. They were litigating the pain of being told that little Braden's cheese dust was not more important than other children breathing. Fact 78. The ceremony outfit catastrophe. In Nevada, one father sued because the school would not allow his daughter to wear a custom outfit at a formal ceremony, even though the dress code for the event had been announced, printed, repeated, and understood by everyone except the family currently trying to freelance pageantry. They didn't want a ceremony. They wanted a red carpet moment with school funding and zero adult interference. Fact 79. The Internet Rule Meltdown. In Ohio, a parent sued because the school enforced its internet use policy after her son used school devices the way undisciplined children always do when told not to. The rule was clear. The violations were documented. The outrage arrived only after consequences showed up with timestamps. They weren't angry the policy existed. They were angry the Wi-Fi turned out to have receipts. Fact 80. The Special Travel Exception Fantasy. In North Carolina, one mother sued because the school refused to bend multiple rules around her family's convenience, all because a trip, schedule conflict, and general sense of self-importance had collided at once. The family treated policy like a suggestion that should politely move aside for logistics. They didn't want fairness. They wanted the institution to behave like a personal assistant with a bell. Fact 81. The Missing Jacket Lawsuit. In Florida, a parent sued because her son lost a jacket at school, which is an incredible amount of legal effort to invest in a child leaving fabric somewhere and never seeing it again. The school had cubbies, hooks, reminders, and no magical cloak tracking division. They didn't want accountability. They wanted the institution to become a federally funded lost and found concierge for one forgetful kid with sleeves. Fact 82. The Lunchbox Tragedy. In Texas, one father sued after his daughter's lunchbox disappeared. acting like the cafeteria had hosted a criminal conspiracy against sandwiches. The school looked, staff asked around, and the lunchbox remained spiritually committed to being gone. None of that stopped the family from treating petty disorganization like organized persecution. They weren't grieving a container. They were litigating the unbearable fact that children lose stuff constantly, and schools are not the FBI. Fact 83. The homework cruelty case. In Georgia, a mother sued because the teacher assigned too much homework, which in this family apparently meant any quantity large enough to interrupt screen time, and the household fantasy that learning should happen effortlessly between snacks. The assignments were normal, the deadlines were reasonable, and the outrage was handcrafted in a lab. They treated basic academic effort like child labor with folders and a due date. Fact 84. The not enough homework meltdown. In Arizona, a parent sued because there wasn't enough homework, which is how you know entitlement has fully left the atmosphere and entered performance art. The family claimed the school was depriving their child of rigor, structure, and challenge, as if worksheets had become oxygen. They wanted to sue a school for not generating enough stress at home, which may be the first recorded case of legal action powered entirely by boredom and ambition. Fact 85. The bus seat crisis. In California, one parent sued because her son wasn't allowed to keep his preferred bus seat, turning assigned seating on public school transportation into a constitutional showdown over legroom and adolescent hierarchy. The school wanted fewer fights and less chaos. The family wanted a reserved throne on diesel wheels. They didn't object to the bus. They objected to democracy reaching row 3. Fact 86. The best friend separation lawsuit. In Louisiana, a mother sued because the classroom seating chart moved her daughter away from her best friend, as if the teacher had dissolved a civil union instead of trying to stop two children from talking through every lesson. The educational motive was obvious. The parental outrage was opera. They acted like the school had broken up a great love story, when really it had just moved one chatterbox out of whispering range. Fact 87. The recess reduction emergency. In Michigan, a parent sued because recess was shortened after weather, scheduling issues, and the basic reality that schools run on time, not childhood fantasy. Her child came home upset, which apparently transformed 7 fewer minutes of running in circles into a matter for the courts. They weren't defending development. They were trying to get a judge involved because the playground clock had the audacity to keep moving. Fact 88. The field trip destination scandal. In Nevada, one father sued because a school trip destination changed, as though replacing one educational venue with another had shattered the family trust forever. The school adjusted logistics. The parent responded like the administration had canceled Christmas and replaced it with a PowerPoint. They treated a scheduling pivot like fraud, because some people really do believe inconvenience deserves legal narration. Fact 89. The classroom temperature lawsuit. In Ohio, a mother sued because the classroom was too cold for her son's comfort, which is a wild escalation for something most adults solve with a hoodie and basic resilience. The school checked the thermostat, followed policy, and kept teaching. The family, meanwhile, behaved like HVAC variation was now emotional abuse. They were not fighting unsafe conditions. They were fighting the ancient injustice of mild discomfort without central heating tailored to their bloodline. Fact 90. The broken personal item drama. In North Carolina, a parent sued because the school wouldn't replace a personal item her child broke during the school day, as if institutions are now insurers for every fragile object students drag into a building. The item was not school property, the break was accidental, and the lawsuit was absolutely on brand. They wanted the district to underwrite clumsiness, which is just parenting failure submitted in legal font. Fact 91. The snow day lawsuit. In Florida, a parent sued because the school called a snow day, or more accurately, a weather closure, and the family disagreed with the decision like amateur meteorologists with a grudge. The roads were bad, the district made the call, and one household decided inconvenience now counted as institutional misconduct. They didn't want safer planning. They wanted a district-wide weather system calibrated specifically to their driveway and mood. Fact 92. The school supplies injustice case. In Texas, a mother sued because her son had to share classroom supplies, apparently because communal pencils had become evidence of state failure. The school was doing what schools have always done: stretch resources and keep children learning. The family acted like one shared glue stick had personally lowered their status. They weren't defending education. They were suing because the classroom failed to mirror their private property theology. Fact 93. The bathroom policy breakdown. In Georgia, a parent sued after her daughter was confused by the bathroom policy and got in trouble for leaving class without following it, which is a breathtaking way to tell the world your legal theory is, rules are mean when my child forgets them. The policy was explained. The outrage arrived anyway. They treated one restroom misunderstanding like the Nuremberg trials with hall passes. Fact 94. The fidget toy constitutional crisis. In Arizona, one father sued because a teacher took away his son's fidget toy after it became less of a regulation aid and more of a full-time desk circus. The child was clicking, spinning, and generally auditioning for least teachable environment possible. They didn't sue over need. They sued because the school refused to let a plastic distraction become the loudest student in the room. Fact 95. The cafeteria mix-up catastrophe. In California, a mother sued because her daughter got the wrong cafeteria meal one day, turning a lunch mistake into a courtroom performance about negligence, distress, and apparently the collapse of civilized society through mashed potatoes. The error was corrected. The family's dignity somehow was not. They behaved like a tray mix-up was a federal food scandal, instead of one Tuesday in a room full of children and chaos. Fact 96. The seating chart sequel. In Louisiana, a parent sued because her son's assigned seat in class was too close to disruptive students, which is amazing because most children solve that exact problem by existing quietly and doing their work. The teacher was actively managing behavior. The parent wanted boutique seating service. They weren't asking for support. They were demanding first-class educational cabin upgrades for one ordinary child. Fact 97. The classroom prank PTSD lawsuit. In Michigan, a father sued after his daughter got embarrassed during a light classroom prank tied to a lesson, acting like one awkward moment had shattered her forever. The prank was harmless, brief, and something most people would later call middle school. They didn't want a safer classroom. They wanted legal damages for the fact that adolescence is occasionally cringe in public. Fact 98. The broken pencil box litigation event. In Nevada, a mother sued because another student damaged her child's pencil box during the school day, and the district didn't respond with the intensity of a multinational recall operation. It was a cheap plastic container, not the crown jewels of a dying empire. They weren't really suing over stationery. They were suing because the school declined to treat a pencil case like insured cargo. Fact 99. The recess equipment scandal. In Ohio, a parent sued because the playground equipment her son wanted wasn't available one day, which is the kind of complaint that sounds made up even before lawyers touch it. Another class had it first, scheduling happened, and a child briefly experienced disappointment without receiving compensation. They treated normal turn-taking like institutional sabotage because patience, apparently, was not part of the curriculum at home. Fact 100. The My Child Was Uncomfortable lawsuit in North Carolina. A mother sued after a series of tiny school annoyances, a seat change, a strict teacher, a missed activity, a policy reminder, added up to what she called an intolerable environment. In other words, the school had become a place where her child occasionally heard no. She didn't sue because the school was broken. She sued because reality kept reaching her child before she could soften it first. Fact 101. The reality denial lawsuit. In Texas, one parent sued because the school refused to treat her son like an exceptional victim after years of weak grades, repeated behavior problems, missed deadlines, and every available sign that the issue was not persecution, but performance. The family wanted accommodations, praise, erased records, and a diploma-shaped apology from reality itself. They weren't suing the school for failing their child. They were suing it for refusing to join the family delusion. A school is supposed to be one of the most boringly structured places on earth. Rules, grades, deadlines, attendance, discipline. A giant institution designed to teach children that actions have outcomes. And somehow, that is exactly what makes it so unbearable for certain parents. Because these lawsuits were never really about safety, they were never really about justice, and most of the time, they were not even really about the child. They were about adults who could not stand the sight of their kid being corrected, ranked, denied, embarrassed, disciplined, or told no. That's the real pattern here. These parents did not want schools to educate their children. They wanted schools to protect them from failure, discomfort, consequences, and the horrifying possibility that their child might just be ordinary, or worse, wrong. That's the real irony. The people claiming to fight for their children were often fighting against the exact things children are supposed to learn, that rules apply, that effort matters, that not every feeling is an injury, and that the world does not owe you a rewritten ending because you hated the first draft. And in the end, that may be the dumbest lawsuit of all. A bad grade, a bruised ego, and a parent trying to sue reality for showing up to school.